Hey, welcome possibility seekers to our very next episode. Now, I'm really excited about this one. I've been wanting to get this guy on for so long. I want to introduce you to Alex Edney. Alex is a program manager at World Vision, and he's also an incredible cyclist. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about cycling. We're going to talk about work-life balance, probably a whole bunch of things. So welcome, Alex.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to be here. Been following the podcast for a little while, so it's nice to join you for a chat.
Yeah, no problem at all. Hey, look, it's your possible podcast. So what does the word possibility mean to you?
Well, I'd like to consider myself an adventurous optimist. So I'm looking for good in people and in situations, and possibility to me says there's an opportunity for adventure, for something good to happen, for growth. So possibility is about that's yet to be explored.
Yeah, I love that. An adventurous optimist. That's a really nice one. I really like that. Let's talk about business first of all, and then we'll get into some cycling and we'll mix it up. You talk about connecting culture with strategy. What's a good example of where you're seeing culture and strategy connecting?
Yeah, so I mean, anyone who's worked anywhere in business will have heard Peter Drucker's famous saying, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And obviously that saying, it's not intended to mean that culture is more important than strategy or that there's some kind of hierarchy. It's more about the fact that you need to ensure that there's alignment between your culture and your strategy. So I like to use a definition of culture from a lady called Carolyn Taylor in her book, Walking the Talk. And it says that culture is the patterns of behavior encouraged, discouraged, or tolerated by people and systems over time. So like when developing your strategy as an organization, the organization also needs to consider what kind of culture is required to achieve that strategy. So an example would be an organization that's launching a new strategy around customer centricity, which is suggesting that the priority is going to be on customer service, engagement. It might slow some things down a little bit, but it's about creating really positive customer interactions. But if that organization's had a past culture that's all been about high performance, which is prioritizing efficiency, volume of outcomes, then there might be some conflict between them. I mean, obviously in that case, both of those cultural attributes are really positive. When a lot of us talk about culture and a lot of organizations start addressing culture, there's perhaps more negative words that they're using associated, like bureaucratic or siloed, and that's going to get in the way of any strategy that you're trying to achieve.
And so I think you can also, though, have a high performance customer centric culture, though, can't you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I think the way I talk about being specific about culture is it's like the thin end of the wedge. You need to choose something that's going to be the thing that you stand behind, but it doesn't mean that you're not also bringing a whole lot of other positive cultural attributes through with you. So, if you are being really intentional about building a culture of customer centricity, then in doing that, you'll be creating other positive cultural attributes as well. So it's not certainly not exclusive to one type of one attribute of culture.
But I think that's a great one, because also we don't want mixed messages, do we? And I think that's where Peter Drucker's quote is so good. When you've got mixed messages, when someone says, well, strategically we're doing that, but the culture says something completely else in terms of recognizing values and the like. That's when you go, well, actually, you know what? The culture will win out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's a great one. Hey, it's really funny. We talk about Peter Drucker, and I'm impressed that you know who Peter Drucker is, and you quoted him. One of my colleagues in the US told me that he actually sat in an MBA class and Peter Drucker was his lecturer. How cool is that?
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I mean, it is funny. All of these like management thinkers, they all have jobs, and they're all people like you and I. And so, I guess you can stumble across them. There's a lady that I follow, Siobhan McHale, who works for Dulux, the paint company. And she's got some really fascinating insights into culture. But she's based in Melbourne, and I bump into people that work with her and around, numerous times. So it's funny how it's quite a small world in the management sort of circles as well.
Yeah, I like that side of things as well from Drucker. And I think the other person around similar views to you, especially around change, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. I'm a big fan of John Cotter's work in change. And he talks a lot about that, the role of leadership in change. It's not only to just come out and say things, but it's actually to get action to happen. And if people haven't understood your message, you said you're back to the drawing board. Don't even go any further, right?
Yeah.
So if it's misaligned or they're confused for whatever reason, or they thought the strategy was over there, now we're doing this. You're back to the drawing board, because if you can't inspire them and get them all going in the one direction, and they actually are aligned, both strategy, is in line with what the culture is, then you're never going to have a change stick.
Yeah, I mean, the say-do gap, we say this thing's important, but what you're doing is saying something completely different.
Yeah. I love that. In fact, I've got a great little line I use now, which is, have I got my AV synced? Is my audio and my visual synced? As a leader, is your audio and visual synced? In other words, you're saying this, but people are seeing you do something completely different, unintentionally or otherwise. Then your AV is kind of like, it's a bit like trying to watch a movie, and it's just that, the audio's out of sync, and they're like, man, it's really frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about change for a second, because you talk a lot about change champions, which I'm 100% with you on. What I'd like to ask you, though, as a leader, is how do you recognize a change champion, or how do you recruit a change champion when you feel you're going to need to get some change champions inside an organization?
Yeah, I mean, like I would characterize a change champion as someone who holds the organization's vision, and they're people, as you know, that they have that informal influence, even where they might not actually have positional authority or a senior role, and because of that, I think they're best found organically through the internal network. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with appreciative inquiry, that idea of using positively framed questions to explore a topic. And I think, if you're launching a change initiative, start with your change sponsor, have a conversation framed in that appreciative inquiry way, and finish it with a simple question that just says, who else should I speak to? And I reckon if you do that twice, then you'll have a pretty big list of potential change champions. It's a process that I ran, and I did that twice. I had a conversation with my leadership team of 8. I asked them for who else should I speak with, and then I did that once more, and the list was so long I couldn't actually speak to everyone. But what it unearthed for me was all of these people that are seen to have internal influence. And so as I engaged with them, it was never intended to be exploring for change champions. But what I actually learned quite quickly was who were those people that were seen across the business to have that influence internally. Fascinating. One of the names that I got was someone who is effectively an administration manager. His role is in facilities and administration, but he's seen to have a lot of influence internally. So then, in having those conversations with them and doing it through that appreciative inquiry way, you sort of engage them into the change that you're trying to make, and they feel a little bit of ownership of it. And then from there, it's a matter of, I guess, building that relationship and empowering them with the knowledge that they need to continue doing what they were already doing, which was having a significant internal influence.
It's a fascinating set of numbers. I love that questioning too. I think that's a really great way. I'm going to throw these numbers at you though. I was talking to some change people in the US and women leaders, and this is a woman leader. This is Carly Fiorina actually gave me these stats, and she headed up HP for a while and did a lot of work in the IT&T space. And she says when you're doing change, she said the numbers she's worked out is it's about 20%. She said. She used to think you needed to have what we call, change champions, but she calls them now, you need change warriors, because change is really difficult.
Yeah.
So she's upgraded to being change warriors who are really in for the fight. So a similar kind of concept, I think. Then she said there's about 20% who are actually vehemently and invested in no change, right? And they will tell you so. And then she said there's about another 20% who just don't want change but won't really tell you. And then the rest are sitting on the fence working out which way is it going to go. And she said that's the role of the change warrior is so important, because they can start the momentum going. But she said there'll be a bunch that'll actually go along with you, but actually just trying to suss out what it's about so they can make sure it doesn't happen. Like they're so invested in no change. Have you come across those people at all?
Oh, I mean, I think we all have. Like I would call them change cynics, and I think are they made, or is it something that they is it like, so I don't characterize them negatively as individual. I think as organizations we create those people because we deliver change poorly so many times that they just get to the point where they say, you know what, enough's enough, no more change. And they refuse to engage in the change because they've had their hopes dashed over and over again. And so I have a little bit of sympathy for those change cynics, because I actually think that that they're refusing to engage because of that dashed hope. But yeah, certainly I think anyone in any organization has come across those people who are critical. The expression I use is that they'll have a hypersensitive bullshit meter, because they're predisposed, or their response that's ready to go is that, no, that's rubbish. That thing that you're wanting to do is rubbish, but I'm not even prepared to give you the time to engage in it. Yeah. And I think, a lot of people put attention and invest attention and energy into that 20%. I think if you put your energy and your attention into the change champions or the change warriors, and they influence the middle ground, those people that are opposed to the change, they don't have an option but to either follow the rest of the crowd, because that becomes what's normal, or they get uncomfortable and they leave. And I think, in industry, you have the ability, perhaps a little bit more readily to action them out in some organisations. That sort of quit and stay mentality is one that is a little bit harder to manage. I spent a number of years in the public sector before I was in this current role, and certainly something that we would see there. But I think you can't invest all your time in those people that are not prepared to come along with you.
Yeah, so you could spend, I think it's a great way of looking at it, is you could spend lots and lots of time investing, and I think there's definitely understanding. I really like your point about, it's not so much the individuals, but what have they been through? Do they have change fatigue is another one I see there. Normally good people say no just simply because they've had change fatigue. Whereas they were maybe previously change warriors who got burned. So it's easy to understand, because rather than just cast them all in one sort of bucket, so you're all negative. That's not always the case. And I love your point about just truly understanding where they've come from. But there will be that percentage that, you could spend eons of time, and have a really long beard, and they still would not come on board. And you just got to move on with the ones, because if you don't, Alex, what I've found is if you don't actually look after the change warriors, they leave, and then they're the last people you want leaving.
Yeah, exactly. If you lose a change warrior and they become frustrated, then the impact of that is multiple times over.
Yeah,
because you lose both the potential, the opportunity cost of someone who was going to be a big advocate for that change.
Yeah, and they move on. You also talk about unspoken messages. You said about shaping unspoken messages that employees receive from leaders. And you talk about that. Give us some examples about unspoken messages. And I think what your point was, they're unspoken messages, and it kind of reflects what's truly valued in the organization, whether it be compensation or this kind of behavior. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I'm really particularly passionate about. If you think our behaviors, or like the most simple of definitions of culture is the way we do things around here, the collective of our behaviors. So if those behaviors are an expression of what we believe and of what we value, those are then influenced by what the messages we receive about what's valued around us. And the example you might think of is how quickly you pick up language and behaviors of a group of people that you're spending regular time with. We met cycling, and when we ride, there'll be things that we do that are kind of unique to the community that we're part of. And sometimes you kind of think, I don't even know why I do that. I just do it because the people around me do it, and therefore it's considered normal. And so in a workplace, of course, there's an ability for leaders, those people in authority, the messages that they send about what they value carry a lot of weight. We all send messages about what is valued through our behavior and through our actions, but those of leaders carry more weight. So how they spend their time, what they spend their time on, the things they talk about, how they act, it all shapes those beliefs about what's valued. So an example of a decision that I made at work, I lead a fortnightly all org stand up for our organization, and when I picked up the initiative and started running it, it was we had an update by go-to-market channel and a finance update. And the go-to-market channel updates were generally based around their revenue. We wanted to build collaboration and innovation, but through these updates in revenue, talking about revenue and in channels, reinforced silos and said we measure performance based on revenue. So we switched it around. So rather than having updates by go-to-market channel, we made it updates by business plan initiative. And so those were cross-functional initiatives, and we only would do a selection in each stand-up. We didn't have enough time. And a short performance update at the end, because we wanted to anchor it in performance, but we didn't want performance to be the kind of the main theme of the update. And I also asked our lead team members, and I would kind of tap them on the shoulder before each meeting to share a win or a learning from the last fortnight, really trying to role model that sense of, you know, sharing wins and learnings around for others to learn from. And so trying to reshape the message that we're sending to, you know, performance is through project outcomes rather than driven purely by revenue.
Yeah, I love that win and share a win and a learning.
Yeah.
Did you get a good balance of both?
No, we obviously, human nature calls us to be more cautious in sharing our learnings, and that's why we do it, why we're trying to call this out, and why we continue to try and massage it out. Because even in the initiative updates, I quite often have initiative leads say to me, I'm sorry, I can't do an update because we haven't reached an outcome. I don't have an outcome to share. And they're the ones I push really hard to say, no, that's perfect. Like, tell us what's happening. Tell us what's held you up in achieving your outcome. Tell us about what's going into delivering the initiative. You know, open the hood. That's why I often say to them, give us a look under the hood. Tell us what's actually happening. And you know, there's some of the best updates we get. You know, we heard an initiative update on our website redevelopment that didn't have any glossy images, you know, because they haven't got to that point yet. They haven't got some website content to show everybody.
But isn't it more authentic though, under the hood? I think is what you're getting at. And you're saying, hey, I'm interested, as is everybody else. It's, but there's this pressure to feel like we've got to deliver this shiny new object, this brand new thing. Yeah. It's something I learned from Google is that what they do is they have this combination of what they call moonshots and roof shots.
Yeah.
You might have read that.
I've heard of it.
I think it's a really good one for people to understand that, hey, you know, the website's going to be unbelievable. When it's finished, we all know what we're going to look at. But you know what? That's kind of like the moonshot. What are the roof shots along the way? It might be we discovered that this bit of code is copied 5 times over. We realized that it was really running slow because of this. And that's a learning. But it's also, you know, it's also a roof shot because we actually realized that, and now we can make a change, and we're in the middle of that change. So you're sort of keeping people along the progress. It's not like just seeing, you know, you and I talk about cycling. It's not like you're sort of coming through with your hands up in the air at the finish. Yeah. You're actually seeing the grind and the work and the suffering that goes on, you know, in the hills beforehand or you know, or on a descent. And I think that if you can try and encourage, like you are, that kind of culture to say it's okay to look under the hood and okay to talk about where we're up to, and we're not actually there yet, but we're on our way.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to build. We are trying to actively build trust as a common element of our culture, and you know, I think it's sort of, unfortunately, it's human nature to look across and say, I'm not seeing anything from them, therefore I doubt their productivity, or I doubt what they're doing.
We go negative town, don't we? We think that we haven't heard anything, so therefore what's gone wrong?
Yeah, or they're not doing a good job, and you know, that becomes the assumption, negative attribution. And so what this does is it actually, by giving people an understanding of what's involved, you know, people have this sort of collective realization of, well, they're actually really busy. They're doing some great work. They haven't delivered the outcome yet because there's a lot that goes into it. So it actually is building this sense of, you know, they are of trust in other teams as well. So yeah, you can see how there's those sort of beliefs we're trying to shape through using an organizational initiative. I mean, and you know, there's a whole heap of other ways that those unspoken messages are shaped and shared. But my manager is regularly on the receiving end of oh, what's going on here? This is a good opportunity to send an important message about what we value. Maybe we need to insert this bit of language, or
Yeah.
change the message, or send it this way. There was a really quick example I'll give you. Is a couple of years ago, we'd had a particularly successful sort of Christmas build-up season, and the Monday before Christmas Eve was the Monday, so everyone was off work from the Tuesday, and one of our receptionists suggested to the head of HR that perhaps we should give everyone the Monday off. And he thought that was a good idea. So he took it to the leadership team and they thought it was a good idea. And he asked me, send an email, draft an email for the comms team to send around to tell everyone we're giving them the day off to say thanks for the hard work. And I was like, what a missed opportunity if that's all we do. And so the lead team were off on a retreat for 2 days. I said, leave it with me. And we actually, I worked with the comms team to print up a card, which we put on everyone's desk. Say, thanks for all your hard work. Enjoy a Christmas gift of a day off. And we made this massive present, which we put in the foyer, and we said to all staff. And it was just a way of saying, well, we're doing something anyway. Let's make sure that people receive a message from us doing that. Let's really make sure the message lands, that we value them and we value the effort that they've put in this year. And it was a really powerful kind of symbol of our value of people.
I just think it's wonderful, Alex. You've taken something that was just going to happen anyway, and you've just amplified it, right? And kind of filled the empty space that was left and would have gone to nothing and would have missed that wonderful opportunity. You haven't cost any more and done, you haven't given it 2 days. It was still a day, but you've really amplified and given such a really important message. And I think that's a great way. That there are things already happening, and it's one of the best things I say to people is, what's already happening in the business? Like what's already scheduled? And someone said to me the other day, they said, what are we going to do around this leadership program? What things can we do in the future? And I said, what have you already got in the calendar for your team? What is there? Is there a kickoff? Is there a quarterly update? Is there a leadership talk? So when have the team already got something in the diary that we can, piggyback on, amplify, connect in and weave in? Because everyone says there's another initiative on top of another initiative on top of another initiative, and that's where you get change fatigue. But if you actually weave it into the same thing and then get the comms right, I love the fact that you work with the comms team. It's such a gold moment. I know it's rolled off the tongue for you, but it's not natural for a lot of people to go, hey, I'll work with the comms team, collaboration, living and breathing it, to actually get it right. So we have three of us who are extremely connected. We've created our sort of internal working team, which is our strategy change lead, our internal communications manager, and myself. And my title is actually updated from the one on LinkedIn. It just hasn't quite been formalized yet, but head of culture and diversity. So this, culture, change, and communications tied together, and so it's enabled us to be really intentional. And I think what I say, culture change is really easy. And it's easy theoretically. It requires you to be disciplined and intentional. Intentional about the message you want people to receive, and disciplined in sending it over and over again. Of course, that way simplifies the complexity behind being intentional and disciplined. But if you're able to do that, be intentional about the messages people receive about what you value, disciplined in sending them over and over again, you'll shape the beliefs. You'll therefore shape the behaviors and achieve the change that you want. So it's simple sometimes
on paper.
Sometimes. Hey, talk about diversity for a second. I know that's coming. We're looking for this is the pre-release of the title. What does diversity mean to you, and why was it important to have that in your title?
I think it means everyone has the opportunity to belong, and everyone has their opportunity to be their best. When my manager first spoke to me about adding that into the role as a component, I had to reflect on it, because my initial reaction was, oh no, I don't think I'm the right person for that role. But what I then spent time doing was reflecting on, why does it matter to me? Why does diversity matter to me? And I reflected on the stories that my mum would tell me about her upbringing, my grandmother has an Italian heritage. Her upbringing in Australia, she's in her mid-90s now, still going, and still full of life and beans, which is fantastic. But in the 30s in Australia, someone who was an Italian, you were ostracized. kind of like some of the communities now that are face that in the Australian community. I mean, now we love our Italian heritage. It's part of our cafe culture and it's our food culture, but that's evolved over time, and so I reflect on the stories of her experience, and I think that's something that impacts me. I've got a cousin who has Down syndrome, who is the most beautiful and wonderful young man, and I think I want him to experience fullness of life. And I grew up with an auntie who was paraplegic, so had no use of her legs. And I think about those people in my life and their life experiences, and as I thought about it, I was like, actually, this is something I do personally care about. And
you must have
I
almost been
am.
hard on yourself, going, how can I not include it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, and so, but what it led me to realize was actually, I think everyone's probably got a story of why it matters to them. And so that was the very first thing that I did in taking on the role was I asked our leadership team to reflect on why diversity mattered to them personally. I asked them about the organization as well, but I asked them to reflect on why it mattered to them personally. And it was fascinating because every answer was different.
Yeah.
One, it was because, they grew up on an island in the Pacific. Another was because they care about, they kind of cheated and gave the organizational answer, but they cared about what it would, why diversity was important to the business. Another was, like mine, some of their kind of family experiences and upbringing, and everyone had their own dimension, but it doesn't really matter. I think, just if you spend some time reflecting on your experience and why diversity matters to you, then you can find the drive to be able to tackle some of the things that are drivers of inequality, which is a privilege to be able to be addressing some of those things and working to be proactive about it. In our organisation, we have working groups. I work for World Vision Australia, which is one of the largest international NGOs globally. We have around 35,000 staff and 100 offices around the world. World Vision Australia has about 400 staff in Australia. And as part of the way that we work and the sector that we're part of, we have roles which exist to help us ensure that we're inclusive in our programming, in our funding grants, and so on. And so I have the privilege of working with some amazing people who help us as an organisation continue to strive to be better. So it's cool.
Yeah, I think also with diversity, and what I've noticed quite a bit, Alex, is in recent times I look at the generations, right? And I know you've got a young family, and what I've seen is that, I'll summarize this, but what I've seen is, the kind of veterans and baby boomers, they were learning how to spell it, right? In sort of Gen X, we've said, hey, this is really important. It's kind of really interesting and important. And the millennials have gone, yeah, no, we definitely see the importance of it. Gen Z is going, we demand it. Like, it's not an option. Like, and if we're going to work for you and you don't understand it, don't have it, don't by your values and your actions and things we've talked about a little earlier, then they're not going to join you.
Yep.
It's so important to them. And then we've got Generation Alpha, which is where your kids come in. And for them, it's just going to be a way of life. I
think it will be normal.
And it's going to be fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah. If we're successful now in this generation, then for them, it's not going to be an issue that needs anywhere near as much attention. And I think that's the beauty, there's a real connection between culture and diversity, because if culture is the collection of our beliefs and how they're expressed in action, then the challenge of diversity is in addressing the history of a culture and cultural clash. One of the terms that always grated for me until I learnt about it was institutional racism. I was always like, oh, you're assuming that I'm racist because or you're assuming that the institution is racist, as in you are judging the individuals in the institution. But what I've since learned is that it's actually got nothing to do with the individuals. It doesn't judge the individuals. It says that the institution is designed on a historical paradigm, if you like, that doesn't meet the needs of a diverse range of
Yeah.
individuals. So that when it talks about institutional racism, it's not judging it the individuals in the institution. It's talking about the foundations that it's built on, the rules, the approaches. Anyway, fascinating topic. It's something
but it is an interesting one. I mean,
yeah.
and you can argue that the individuals have a role to make the change in that, but sometimes we get blindsided. Sometimes we are diverse, we're not racist, but the institution, I really like the way you put that, the institution, because of historical foundations, principles, just stuff that we just kind of, we don't see, we're blindsided by it sometimes, but it's actually built not to succeed. It's not reflective of the times that it needs to be. And I think that's a great...
So the responsibility that we all bear is to be intentional about trying to learn. And that's all we can commit to. We can't be something that we're not, and we can't get from 0 to 100 instant. I mean, we'll talk about cycling in a minute, I'm sure, but you can't. You first buy a bike. You don't go and enter one of the top races in the country. You buy a bike and you start by riding 10 kilometers around the block, and you're sore for 3 days, and you think, what am I even doing? And I think it's the same with this experience of diversity, is that you start. You learn. It's not about...
it's a little uncomfortable too. I think that's the point, isn't it? It might feel a little uncomfortable, and that's okay. When you're changing anything that's a challenge, as I say, everything worthwhile is uphill, including cycling.
That's right. And I mean, it's not about self-criticism or beating yourself up. I think it's about learning, and it's about growth. It's been a really fascinating kind of 6 months for me as I've explored and learnt from some fantastic people in my organization. But it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, well, congratulations. It's going to be great. I'm glad you said yes to that including diversity in your title, because I think you're the perfect guy for it, as we've just learned. Hey, let's talk a little about cycling now and sort of weave this thing in. You and I met cycling, and ladies and gentlemen, I actually first met from Alex. We're on an event together, and I'll be pleased to say that I was actually able to hang with him for about 50% of the ride. And in fact, I was a little bit longer than Alex, because I actually convinced you to take a toilet break. So that was a good idea. That's so I could slow you down. But then my dastardly plan fell apart, because straight after the toilet break, you took off, and I never saw you for dust. And to this day, I still don't know how I hung in with you for so long. But really what happened after that, though, is as we connected to the Knights of Suburbia, so the Knights of Suburbia cycling, and I came across the Knights of Suburbia really through you. Tell us how you got involved with Knights of Suburbia, and sort of what the group does and what it means to you.
Yeah, so Knights of Suburbia is a cycling community founded around a passion for being inclusive for mental health, and but where it originated was in the club racing scene in Melbourne. So when it began, it's just a handful of friends who built a kit, created a name, and decided to do some fundraising for a mate's mental health charity, the Love Me Love You Foundation. That was, it must be about 6 or 7 years ago now, and they were in the local race scene, and I got to know a little bit about them when there was just a handful of them, and one of the things that really connected for me was that story about mental health. I think, like all of us, we have a story, whether it's ourselves or a friend, of an experience of mental health. And for me, one of my best friends, and the guy who got me into cycling, he's someone who's had a long battle with his own mental well-being and mental health. So I've walked that journey alongside of him. And so when I saw this opportunity to kind of connect in with some other people to race with, as well as being part of a movement around mental health, I was like, well, how do I get involved in that? And it's been a real pleasure to be part of that, and part of growing that community over the last kind of 4 years.
It's been amazing, and that's exactly why I got involved. And I think you're right. We all have a journey, whether we've walked it ourselves, seen others and the like, and we feel. And when I saw it, I thought, here's something you're cycling with, but you can actually mean something, to me. And I think some of the best rides I've done, with the group, with COS, we call it Knights of Suburbia, but it's just growing so much, hasn't it? Well, why do you think it's grown like so much in the last 2 years? I think, it's due to people like you, I know that, but what, and also you just see so much of the kid around now. You see so many more people that really got into it. What do you think's driven that?
Well, I think you just said it just there. It means something. I think there's for me, there's 2 reasons why it's been so successful. And the first bit is that it means something. the community awareness and understanding and appreciation for mental well-being. Mental health is something that is important for all of us, whether we suffer from mental illness or not. We all have mental well-being, and I think that awareness has grown, so that's contributed to it. There's a movement around that, and this sort of community that's being built around a safe place for conversations around mental health. And then the second part is the kit is loud. It's very visible. It's out there. It's bright colors, and I think that's part of it. Like the whole when it started, the idea of the loud kit was that it sparked off a conversation. What's Knights of Suburbia about? It's we're about racing and we're about mental well-being. Tell us more about that. And sort of some of the conversations we've had on the bike and we've had with plenty of others. It's amazing how deep people go very, very quickly. And I think Knights of Suburbia is sort of this little beacon to say, hey, we're a safe place. Not about unloading your burdens on others, but it's about connection and being part of something. And so, it's over the last 12 months, as much of Australia has been. I really didn't like the social distancing. I think, how was it first called? It's like it was like physical. It was social distancing, but I was like, it's physical distancing.
Yes.
It's not social distancing.
Correct.
We're being physically separated, but it doesn't mean we can't still connect. Yep. And I think over the last 12 months, as much of the country has been physically disconnected, so many more people have jumped on our Facebook page, to the point where it's probably doubled in the last 12 months. I think it's 2,500 people part of our community now. We've got bunch rides all around Australia and overseas. So this friend I was just
talking, hasn't it? I mean, I think the other thing is that I think, especially in Victoria, where you and I are, I mean, it was even more, concentrated, the social distancing, physical distancing. We were shortened on rides and even know who we could ride with. And I think the other thing, Alex, is that those of us who ride certainly understand the physical and mental connection, of riding, and with the endorphins, and certainly you're physically more healthy. But God, I tell you what, and having someone who went cold turkey and had to give up cycling because of injury earlier this year, as you might know, I just it really hurt. I really went backwards mentally with that. I really struggled. I walked and I ran and I skateboarded and I tried a bunch of stuff, but I just couldn't replace the cycling. And I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why, but I certainly couldn't replace what that was giving me. And I think we all appreciated maybe in the last 12 months how much we saw the growth of bicycles. Of course, you and I couldn't get anything serviced, but I mean, but we saw that real growth. And I think potentially that's possibly why the Knights is also growing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have very individual drivers and needs, but for me personally, I recognise that cycling meets a lot of my needs, and I had a period off the bike a fair while back now, but nearly 3 years it took to resolve some knee issues I was having. It stopped me riding, and it was during that period that I decided to take riding a bit more seriously and cycling a bit more seriously, and that was after that I got into racing. But it was certainly the thing that I missed was that camaraderie, I guess fellowship, I guess, even if you like to call it that, that regular connection with people, not with any expectation of anything, and you're doing a pursuit together, so you're looking forward. It's not like you're sitting there staring into each other's eyes,
very dangerous.
in that space that's created without any expectation, there's room for connection and room for relationship. It is a really unique way of connecting. And the funny thing about cycling, as opposed to a lot of other sports, is you're quite often riding at with a level of exertion where you can readily have a conversation. So it's not like you're exerting yourself to that point that you can't talk. And so it leads to all sorts of great discussions.
Now you've you've really taken the cycling seriously, and you call yourself a kind of an amateur hack, but you're absolutely incredible. Now let's talk about a couple of things. One is you got a one goes a wild card, I think, to the elite racing at Ballarat for the elite main event, which you got the invite for that, and you competed. And I got to tell you, it was so exciting seeing you on the front. And I think Alex had a goal, ladies and gentlemen, beforehand. He said, "I just got to hang in there for the first, I think it was like 40 minutes until the TV coverage comes on, so people can at least see me. So I can hang in there that long." But yeah, I mean, just seeing you, I'll never forget it, seeing you in the nice suburbia kit. You're leading a bunch. It was just fantastic, and you had a great event. But tell us what that experience was like at that elite level.
Oh, it was absolutely incredible. I mean, I guess like all of us, we all question our ability, and I would never have sort of put myself in for something like that until I had a few people in my ear quietly encouraging me to do it. And the opportunity to race against Australia's best cyclist, and some of the world's best cyclists from Australia, so they were there, to be there in that same race, and riding alongside them and matching them up the hills was just something I'll never forget. The race is 186 kilometres, 16 laps of this circuit near Ballarat, nearly 12-kilometre circuit. And so I had 3 tiers of goals. The first one was, don't get dropped on the climb the first lap. And the start line, you leave the start line and you go straight up the climb. And I've been riding a bit over the lockdown. Steele von Hoff, the Commonwealth Games gold medalist from the Gold Coast, he lives around the corner from me. I discovered early in lockdown, at the other end of my 5K radius. So we explored our shared overlapping 5Ks, and got some good riding in. And he was someone who had encouraged me to do it. And he gave me this tip. He said, if you start at the front of the climb, at the front of the bunch, then you've got the whole bunch to drift through to still be in the bunch at the top of the climb. Anyway, my adrenaline was through the roof when the gunshot were fired to start the race. I did my hardest 1 minute effort at the start, but I rode the front, the first bit of the climb, dropped my way back through the bunch. I got over the top of the hill, and I nearly fist pumped to be like, I made it. My second goal, I think, as you said, was make the TV broadcast. That was 30 minutes of the race. And I think those first 2 goals were a little bit tongue-in-cheek. If I didn't think I could do those 2, I wouldn't have entered. But I still never, I didn't feel certain. But I was like, well, I should be able to. But my real goal, the goal that I felt like was a stretch for me, was to make it to 100 kilometres. So it's a 186 kilometre race. I wanted to make it beyond halfway, make it to 100 kilometres, which is 9 laps of the race. And I made it. I made it to 9 laps. I made it to 9 laps in the bunch. And as I got dropped on the 9th lap, and I was over the moon. For me, I'd won the race, and I was able to do 3 more laps before they waved me off the circuit to clear it up for the race coming behind. So
when we just it's explaining that for other people. So when you get dropped, it means that you fall behind the main bunch. You're kind of on your own, not within the group that's moving quickly. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd exceeded any of my wildest expectations. I'd outlasted heaps of professional and semi-professional riders. So yeah, I'm still on cloud 9, and that was a couple of months ago now. Yeah, it was
that's
really
about 136K you got in. Is that about right?
Yeah,
I get that right. Fantastic. And I know that circuit. I've done it. Ridden it a couple of times, or three times, I think. Never as long as that, and nowhere near your pace. But and that that first climb is actually 2, isn't it? There's the first bit. There's a little bit of respite, and then it just goes harder again.
Yeah.
But outstanding effort. Now the other outstanding race you did, and I'm just trying to get this right. Was Melbourne Warrnambool last year or 2019? I can't remember.
It was last year.
So just made it.
The things that obviously were kicked off in the world, but the pandemic itself was hadn't been declared and wasn't really something on our radar in Australia just yet. So yeah, it was February last year.
Yeah, and you were just second. When I say you just missed first, you were a really solid second.
Yeah,
I think an A grade, was that right? If I'm getting that right?
Yeah. So the way the race works is there's a National Road Series race and then support categories. And I was riding the A grade support category, and I was second by about an inch. But funnily, I had no idea where anyone else was, it was just, go as hard as I could for the line, because we were all riding in the same bunch. So there's riders everywhere. I got a photo of the finish line, and the guy that beat me, we were right next to each other, and it was about an inch in. It's just incredible. And I was like, there was nothing in me that was disappointed about that. I went in without any expectation, and so to achieve that was a cool experience.
I was, and I know that ride's a long way. Is it what's the length? Is it 200 or 300?
267 Ks.
267 Ks. It's enormously. It's an incredible ride, and one of the oldest rides, I think, in the world too, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Cycling events. And one of the interesting things is I was talking to Steinis at camp, who was on the podcast a few podcasts ago. And one of the things he was practicing. I don't know if you've done this, but he was practicing picking up the feed bag at really high speed. And it was just a fascinating, they talk about 1%ers, and I think it's like more than that, but he said just so important that don't miss it, because you go for a long time, but also you don't want to get unstable when it happens as well. Is that some of the stuff that you've practiced as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So last year, Olivia, Olivia, did the feed zones for me, and we practiced a few times beforehand and managed to nail it on the event day. This year I've got 2 different feeders, and so we'd already practiced for the date that was cancelled, and we've got some more practice scheduled in before the race in a couple of weeks.
So you're on. So what date is the new race, Alex, just for people out there?
1st of May. It is going to be televised on SBS Cycling Central. So if you do enjoy your cycling, it's one of the best races in Australia. So a good one to watch.
Fantastic. Now, well, you talked about a lot of this cycling, and I know that. And how many Ks do you do a week? What would be an average for you?
This year I'm averaging about 500 Ks a week, or just over. But
so a bit over 500. I'm going to slow you down here. So that's a bit over 500 kilometers a week you're riding on average. Just say, people, if you want to look going for a ride with Alex, he loves to have you along. But I'm just giving you the expectation.
Yeah, look, it's a bit too much. The last 3 weeks it's been 600, and this is really all building for the Melbourne to Warrnambool. I started the year preparing for an event in the middle of Feb. It was postponed due to coronavirus, and it's felt a little bit more like a job to sustain it at this level through to now. So I'm looking forward to dropping that back. But what I will seek to maintain is about that 400 Ks a week, sort of the sweet spot for me. If I can hit that, I'm pretty happy.
Now, I knew you were doing lots of Ks. And last time you and I caught up with coffee, I knew you were doing lots of Ks. You know how I knew you were doing lots ofKs? Because you're the first guy I've ever seen pull out his battery charger to charge all his lights up. And I knew you had to be going a lot longer than I was.
Oh no,
charging up your devices with a USB hub or something.
Yeah, that's probably because cycling is an expensive hobby, so you can't just keep upgrading things. My bike computer and my lights are getting a little old. I do need to upgrade them, but they haven't quite hit the top of the list yet.
We'll have to get that upgraded on the list. Now, talk about that, because a lot of the stuff you get allowed to do, you're obviously a sensational leader. You're very busy with that. You're enormous cycling, but you've got a whole family that clearly supports you. So tell us how the balance works with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got two beautiful young boys, 2 and 4, absolute light of my life, and I think for me, the most important balance starts at home. And my wife Tara, she and I have pretty good understanding of what's important in our lives, and we do our best to make time for those things. So that's time for us each individually to pursue our hobbies, time for us together as a couple, and time for us as a family. In this time, as I'm leading into the big race, the balance has probably gone a little bit out, and maybe that's that reflection of it's felt a little bit like a job. I felt like some of the sacrifices I'm making at the moment to be ready for a race like the Melbourne to Warrnambool is, sometimes it feels almost a little bit selfish, but as I drop back to a more sustainable level, it's really about making time for those different things that are important. Outside of family, in terms of what I've pursued in my work, I haven't sought the additional responsibility that might mean sacrifices outside of work. I haven't taken on those roles that demand more of me that I want to give. And then, I've also been quite intentional to consider where I work based on proximity for commuting, because it's actually a way I've been able to sustain a pretty healthy level of cycling, is by weaving it into my commute. Now, over the last years, as we've had kids, and my wife's work has been a little bit up and down, I've had a lot more flexibility. Now she's working a bit more. I don't have quite so much. So you might have seen some of my recent commutes, Rob, that have been 100 kilometres to the office, riding kind of the wrong way for 20 k's, and then the other wrong way for 30 k's.
I thought you'd change roles
the office. Yeah,
for a while. I saw your direction going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV. That's why.
healthy aspects all around, but I think the balance is really important. I think you talk about that work-life balance and the seasonality too. You're putting a lot in now because there's an event coming up, but then you'll learn to taper it off and not take it to 1,000k a week.
And talking about it, we talk about what's important.
Yes.
It is. I think you said a supportive family. It's not all me. It's a whole family commitment for me to be able to ride at this level. I think the other part of it I really love is to give my kids an example of having a hobby and a passion, and being fit and healthy. You'll see every week I'm doing rides with my boys. With Arlo, we did 20 kilometers on the weekend. Him on his little on his own bike, but with a bit of a helpful push along, some laps at the velodrome, and that gives me as much joy as the 200 kilometers I did yesterday, riding out for a race in the rain and wet and wind. So it's sometimes the balance within it as well.
I love the way you used to do, and Arlo's probably big for it now, but I used to love that story when Arlo used to go with you on the bike, on your race bike. You used to put him on the seat, and you and Arlo would go past these mammals.
Yeah.
These mammals would be on Beach Road doing their whole cycling thing and looking really cool, like we all try and do, and then you'd go past with Arlo smiling on the frame. And
we only did it a few times, but it was a buzz. I mean, we still he's a cheeky one, but even now, I'm on an old mountain bike and I'm pushing him on his bike, and we'll still go past someone who's out, where we live, there's some good trails around us. So someone else who's out on their bike, and we'll go past them. I guess that's one of the benefits of the fitness I get from the road bike.
Yeah, fantastic. Hey, look, we're nearly out of time now, and I just wanted to ask you one more question, because you're a father, you're a husband, you're a leader, you're a great cyclist. But if I had to take you back in time to when you were a 15-year-old Alex, what would be some words of advice?
Yeah, I think it would say, don't stress about the future. Try to be wise, be reflective, keep striving. But life is going to take you places that you couldn't have dreamed of. You don't know what's going to happen. So focus on doing what you're doing and doing it well. But don't stress. Don't put too much weight in what might be in the future.
Fantastic. Great words of advice. Alex Edney, thank you so much. You're on LinkedIn if people want to connect up with you and find you. We'll have those details in the show notes, but thank you so much for being on the show.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of the It's All Possible podcast. Please subscribe and rate the podcast you listen to so we can continue to serve you and inspire others. Remember, connect to us on all the social media channels. The It's All Possible podcast is hosted by me, Rob Hartnett, and produced by the phenomena that is Finn Hartnett. Connect with us via LinkedIn, Instagram, or the link tree in the show notes.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.